My family invited me to a reconciliation dinner after 3 years of no contact. 16 people, lobster, and a $400 bottle of wine. Then Dad looked at me and said, "You're paying." What he didn't know was I'd already spoken to the waiter. The check ruined his plan. My father looked at me across a table covered in lobster shells and the wreckage of a $400 bottle of Bordeaux, folded his hands like a man about to close a deal he'd already won, and said 5 words loud enough for 16 people to hear. "You're paying, right? You owe us that much." My mother nodded. Aunt Linda reached for more butter. My sister Brooke, 3 glasses deep, smiled at me over the rim of her wine glass with the particular smile of someone who has been waiting all evening for this exact moment. And I said, "Let me go take care of things." Every single one of them exhaled. Here's the thing about working in restaurant operations for 11 years. I know exactly what a table like that costs before the check ever arrives. I can calculate the margin on a $62 entree while I'm still reading the menu. I know what a floor manager's body language looks like when a reservation has a note attached to it. I know the difference between a table that's celebrating and a table that's performing. And I had known from the moment I walked through that door and saw 16 faces instead of 3, exactly what kind of table this was, so I had already handled things, I just hadn't told anyone yet. The invitation came on a Tuesday morning in March via text from my mother, Carol Ashworth, 61 years old, retired school administrator, woman who had not spoken to me in 3 years and 2 months. And by my count, 11 days. "Diana, your father and I have been doing a lot of thinking. We'd like to start fresh. Dinner Saturday, just the 4 of us. You, me, Dad, and Brooke. Neutral ground, we miss you." I read it 4 times. Then I called my therapist, Dr. Nadia Reeves, 13 years in practice, specializing in family estrangement and narcissistic family systems. Office in the Midtown building with the broken elevator that I'd been climbing 6 flights of stairs to reach for 2 years. She picked up on the second ring because I have the kind of relationship with my therapist where she knows when I'm calling from a parking lot. My mom texted. I said, "Tell me." I read it to her. A pause. "How do you feel? Like it's a trap?" I said, "Why?" Because the last time she suggested a fresh start, she said my entire extended family on an email about my mental health struggles and suggested they all pray for me. I paused. I'm not being paranoid, I have receipts. Dr. Reeves made the sound she makes when she's choosing her words with care, a small considered exhale. "You don't have to go," she said. "But if you decide to, I want you to think about what you need to have in place before you walk through that door. Not to protect against something bad happening, just to know yourself in that room." I thought about it for 3 days, then I replied to my mother, "Okay, Saturday works." What I did not say, "I know exactly who you are and I've been paying attention for 34 years. Let me give you the landscape because it matters. I'm Diana Ashworth, 34. I've worked in restaurant and hospitality operations since I was 22, started as a floor manager at a mid-range chain. Worked my way up. Currently serve as Director of Operations for a regional restaurant group with 11 locations across 3 states. My job is logistics, margin, staff, systems. I am organized in the way that people become organized when chaos is what they grew up in and order is what they built for themselves. My parents, Frank and Carol Ashworth, are the kind of people who are very well liked in the abstract. Frank is 63, retired now from a mid-level sales career, the kind of man who tells the same 4 stories at every gathering and laughs the loudest at his own punchlines. Carol organizes the church silent auction and remembers everyone's birthday and has a gift for making people feel seen in the first 5 minutes of conversation that takes years to recognize as performance. My sister Brooke is 31. She has never held a job for longer than 18 months. She has borrowed money from our parents, and during the years I was still speaking to them from me with the casual frequency of someone who has never once been told no with any real consequences attached to it. The arrangement started 3 years ago over something that will sound small if I summarize it and won't sound small if I explain it fully, so I'll land somewhere in the middle. My father asked me to co-sign a $40,000 personal loan for Brooke, not to lend her the money, to put my name and my credit on a legal document guaranteeing his daughter's debt. When I said no and explained why, she had defaulted on 2 previous debts, one of which had been a loan for me that I'd written off 3 years prior. My mother told me I was selfish. My father told me I'd always thought I was better than the family. And Brooke sent me a voice memo that I will not quote here, but that my attorney, Claire Hendricks of Hendricks Family Law, later described as aggressively, emotionally abusive. I saved the voice memo. I save everything. I stopped returning calls after that 2 years and 11 months of silence broken by a Tuesday text about a fresh start and just the four of us. I should have known. I did know. I went anyway. The restaurant was called Maison Bao, French-inspired white tablecloths. The kind of place that doesn't put prices on the menu they give you at the table, because if you have to ask, the thinking goes, you probably shouldn't be there. I know Maison Bao well. I've consulted with their operations team twice, and their weekend floor manager is a woman named Gwen Calloway, whom I've known for 6 years through industry events. I arrived at 7:02 p.m., 2 minutes later than my mother had asked, because I'd spent the previous 11 minutes sitting in the parking lot, doing the breathing exercises doctor Reeves had taught me for moments when I needed to feel grounded before walking into a room. The host escorted me to a private dining room in the back. I heard them before I saw them. Laughter, overlapping conversations, the familiar loudness of a group that had been eating, drinking, and enjoying themselves long enough to forget anything could interrupt the evening. I stepped through the doorway, 16 people, 2 long tables pushed together, lobster shells already piled on 3 plates. A bottle of red wine with the label turned outward, a 2018 Chateau Pichon Baron. I recognized it immediately from the restaurant's wine list. $412, my Uncle Gary and his wife, Renata. My mother's sister Linda and her husband Don, 3 of Brooke's friends I'd only met a few times, my cousin Seth and his girlfriend, 4 people I didn't recognize at all. At the head of the table sat my father, waving a credit card like a victory flag while telling the server to bring the good stuff. My mother turned toward me with a smile so warm and perfectly rehearsed it could have been framed. Aunt Linda actually applauded. I stood there for exactly 2 seconds, then I smiled. I took my seat, I ordered sparkling water, and I started doing the math. While Aunt Linda told me how wonderful I looked, Seth asked about my job, and Brooke casually refilled her wine glass. I was calculating the bill. 16 people. Based on what I could already see and what I knew about the menu, 2 whole lobsters at $89 each, 3 Wagyu orders at $74, the $412 bottle already half empty, with another one almost certainly on the way. Appetizers, side dishes, desserts all still to come. The final bill would probably land somewhere between $2,800 and $3,400 before the tip. I know those numbers the way most people know their monthly mortgage payment, and I also knew something else. My father doesn't order $400 wine. I knew that because I'd spent 31 years in his house. He once returned a flannel shirt because the sale tag had fallen off before he could confirm the discount. He believed the early bird special was practically a moral virtue. Every family dinner growing up ended the same way. He'd stare at the check for an uncomfortably long time, then divide it in a way that somehow always worked slightly in his favor. Yet there he was, acting like a man who'd suddenly forgotten the price of things. Something didn't make sense. I told myself maybe they'd come into money, maybe this dinner was genuine. Maybe I was so used to looking for hidden motives that I was imagining one where none existed. I believed that for about 40 minutes, then I excused myself to the restroom. The restrooms at Maison Bao sit down a short hallway off the main dining room, marble floors, elegant lighting, the kind of place that reminds you the experience doesn't end at the table. There are 2 private restrooms. I opened the first one. On the marble counter beside the sink, screen still glowing, sat a phone in a rose gold case. Brooke's. I recognized the MagSafe case immediately, complete with the white pop socket that read main character energy. I'd never decided whether it was ironic or completely sincere. I hadn't planned to touch it. I only meant to move it aside, use the restroom, wash my hands, and leave. But the notification banner was impossible to ignore. A group chat, dinner plan, 3 members. Preview, don't tell Diana it's everyone, she won't dare. I picked up the phone, the conversation was still open. I read every message. My mother 8 days earlier, don't tell Diana it's everyone. Once she's here with the whole family watching, she won't dare say no. She's never been good at making a scene. My father, just make sure she sits near me, I'll handle the ask. Brooke, order the expensive stuff before she gets here. Once it's on the table, she can't exactly send it back. Lol, my mother again, we're not asking for money, we're welcoming her back into the family. She should be grateful we're even giving her this chance. Then my father the following morning, the message that made my fingertips go cold: Diana can cover us through spring. She's got more than enough. I read the thread twice, then I placed the phone back exactly where I'd found it, screen down, same angle. I washed my hands. I looked at myself in the mirror for just a second. This wasn't the time to feel anything. It was the time to think. I remembered what Dr. Nadia Reeves had told me before I walked through that door: know exactly what you need in place before you walk in. I turned off the faucet. Instead of heading back to the private room, I walked toward the host stand. Gwen Calloway was reviewing something on a tablet. She'd been Mason Bow's weekend floor manager for 4 years. Before that, she'd managed 2 other restaurants where we'd worked together. We'd shared coffee a few times, spoken on a hospitality conference panel in 2022, and occasionally texted about industry matters. She looked up. Deanna, not a question. I kept my voice calm. I'm not the host for that private room, and I won't be paying for that table tonight. Please bring the full check to the gentleman sitting at the head of the table, the one whose card was used to make the reservation. Gwen looked at me for 1 second, then she nodded. No questions. No surprise, people who have spent years in hospitality have seen every version of a family dinner imaginable. They know when silence is the right response. I returned to the table, picked up my sparkling water, and waited. The next hour became the greatest performance I'd ever witnessed. And I'd once sat through a 3-hour experimental opera where absolutely nothing happened for 40 minutes. My father played his role perfectly, generous, warm, and eager to look like the forgiving parent. My mother acted interested in my life again. Aunt Linda kept complimenting me, and Brooke smiled with the confidence of someone who thought she already knew how the evening would end. When dessert arrived, my father smiled and said loud enough for everyone to hear, "You're paying, right? You owe us that much." I calmly replied, "Let me go take care of things," and stepped out for a few minutes because everything had already been arranged. When I returned, the server placed the check in front of my father instead. He confidently handed over his card, but it was declined. Then his backup card was declined, then a third card. The room fell silent. He looked at me and started, "You were supposed to, but couldn't finish." "I know, Dad," I said quietly. That's exactly the problem. I left the restaurant, ignored the messages that followed, and the next morning contacted family lawyer Claire Hendricks. After reviewing years of documented financial manipulation, she sent a formal letter warning that any future attempts at financial coercion would be documented and addressed. Months later, my parents stopped contacting me. My father never apologized, only spoke about how the dinner had gone wrong. In therapy, I realized the dinner hadn't changed who they were, it simply showed me the truth. For the first time, I was in the room, saw everything clearly, and walked away without paying the price.